On today's show, the Houston Rockets have clinched a postseason berth. What are going to be the biggest playoff adjustments for both Jaylen Green and Alperen Sengun? What about the rest of the Rockets' young core? It's all coming up right here at Locked On Rockets.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What's up and welcome to another edition of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian and credentialed media member. I'm also the host of Locked On NBA Thursdays. Be sure to follow along wherever you listen to your podcasts or on YouTube. Just search Locked On Rockets, where the best way you can help us grow our show is to listen every single day on a podcast platform of your choosing. Like, comment, subscribe on YouTube. Also check out our Locked On Rockets newsletter. Would sincerely appreciate all of that support. Now, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Just go to FanDuel.com to check it out. And as always, thanks so much for making Locked On Rockets part of your day every single day, whether it's on your way to work, on your lunch break, in the gym. Thank you so much for being an everydayer. Joining us now is your weekly co-host, NBA draft enthusiast, and diehard Houston Rockets fan, Madison Moore, who you can track down on Twitter at MadmanLeaks, here because we're going to talk a little bit about kind of, I guess, postseason expectations, adjustments that we are going to hopefully see out of. Obviously, Jalen Green and Alperen Sengun are kind of the two biggest guys, the guys with the most, I guess, riding on this upcoming postseason for the, kind of their future with this Houston Rockets team and what this Rockets team is trying to ultimately achieve in pursuing a championship. And we're talking about that because, spoiler alert, the Rockets have clinched a postseason berth. Now, it's a little bit weirder. They haven't clinched a playoff spot outright, but they can no longer, with their record the way it stands right now at 45-25, they can no longer fall out of the play-in tournament bracket. So even if they lost every single game from here to the finish line, they will still at least be in the play-in tournament, which, like, honestly, Madison, you know, for us, we've been in the trenches with this Rockets team for a minute. Like, let's pat ourselves on the back a little bit, right? If you're a Rockets fan that survived through the Silas era and the rebuild and all that, this is a milestone achievement. So let's start with kind of, I guess, expectations or hopes, adjustments, whatever, let's start with Jaylen Green here, because I feel like I'm thinking about it right now on paper. It's going to be a big shock to both Jalen and Sengun getting to the postseason. I could be wrong on this, Madison, but I feel like it's going to be a harder adjustment to postseason basketball for Jalen Green than it will be for Alp, at least on the surface.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, all the young guys, we'll talk about them, but they're all going to have, really tough adjustments. And for Jalen Green, as a guard, as a decision maker, when teams know all your tendencies, decision making is, of course, going to be first and foremost for Jalen Green during this playoff run. Whether you make or miss shots, I mean, that happens throughout the game. But the way Jalen has remained impactful throughout this recent stretch, whether he's shooting it well or not, is through his decision making, right? And his ability to take care of the ball. And we know how every play in a playoff game down the stretch has the feel of like the last 2 minutes of a game. And so things get tighter, and we want to see guys perform under pressure and be able to problem solve as defenses are geared up and have made adjustments, of course, over the course of a series. So I think the biggest thing that Jalen is going to have to confront is his decision-making and his ability to not turn the ball over and make good decisions out of that.
And so obviously some of this is going to be ultimately matchup dependent, right? If you roll into a team that has, some elite wing depth or perimeter defenders, things like that, then that's going to, make life a little bit more difficult for Jalen than going up against a team that doesn't have that, as far as players on the roster, that kind of thing. And, we're not going to sit here and sift through all the different possibilities here, because unfortunately right now it could go any which way. The Rockets could really wind up facing, we talked about this recently in one of our recent episodes with Dave Hardesty, aka Clutch Fans, right? The Rockets could realistically face anybody in the Western Conference not named the OKC Thunder in the first round of the playoffs. That's just how crazy things are out west. So we're not going to get into anything matchup specific. I agree with your point about the decision making, and that's been the area that Ime has constantly talked about with Jalen, right, is talking about his decision making, his ability to make reads, understanding how defenses are guarding him. But the playoffs become so different because instead of it being a one-off against a team in the slog of an 82-game season, you are getting the best of the best. You're getting a coach who is sitting down and game planning and looking at every little minute decision or looking for every even razor thin edge advantage that they can get over a specific player. So if there's a specific coverage or a specific level of pressure, whether it's being blitzed, whether it's seeing a zone, whatever it might be, to slow down Jalen, instead of seeing it for a couple possessions here or there or a game here or there through the regular season, you're going to see it every single possession in the postseason. And that, I think, is going to be when teams dial it up to 11 in the postseason, that is going to be a big wake-up call for both Sengun and for Jalen.
Yeah, and just for an example, I mean, Jalen has become very proficient at getting the ball to Sengun in the middle of the pick and roll, in the short roll, and especially when teams begin to hedge and trap off of Sengun, giving him those passing angles. But teams are going to wise up to that is his outlet, and they're going to fake hedge and then retreat back to the passing lane of Sengun. And it's going to be interesting to see how Jalen handles that, how that'll work. You know, maybe in game one, but he won't be able to do it as successfully throughout the games. And how does he respond to that? How does he on the job begin to problem solve? And like you said, we're not worried about any one matchup, but each matchup is going to provide those different areas in his decision making and processing against those matchups are going to be essential for him. And the final thing I'd like to say about Jalen, where I really think is the biggest issue with him in the playoffs, is going to be just the level of physicality. We already know that Jalen doesn't get a wise whistle call, like a good whistle call, and that might actually it might bode well for him in the playoffs because he already doesn't get a whistle, so he's used to it.
He's used to it. He's like, I'm not a foul merchant like SGA. I don't need the free throws. I can do it without it.
Yeah, he knows how to perform, without getting the whistle, and he's figured out different ways to still be effective. But he's going to have to bring it up to another level. And one of the issues that I find with Jalen's game is there's not a lot of physicality in his offense, right? The ability to knock guys off their spot, to just get an inch of space so you can get that shot off. There's not much in between floater game when guys are going to be packing the paint and not really giving you. They know they want to take the threes away and the paint away, and there's this in between game that Jalen is going to have to do cat and mouse with between a floater and dropping it off or taking the shot. And so that also goes into the decision making. But when he gets in a tough spot, he needs to have the ability to put his shoulder in someone's chest and knock them off the spot so that he can have that split second to get his shot off. And right now, I think that is something Jalen has slowly been adding to his game, but not nearly enough to withstand the playoffs. All those, acrobatic slinking through, trying to beat a guy to the rim, that stuff's not going to work in the playoffs. They're gonna be dialed in on those types of plays. So I think Jalen will learn a lesson about using his physicality to create space, whether that be in the mid range, whether that be getting to the basket, and when his shot is not on. Because if Jalen isn't on one of those heater stretches, there's not going to be a lot of room to operate, especially with the shooting limitations of this team.
Caveat, I think Jalen has gotten really adept at his kind of the craftiness right in his game, where he's gotten so much better at, and his game is predicated on beating his man instead of sometimes where his man will, and that's the point you're trying to make is, he needs to be able to have a response for when a defender does stop him, right? When a defender is with him all the way, instead of trying to go up for one of those like crafty slinking layups, whatever, corkscrewing around the rim. He needs to have a response where he just dips the shoulder and creates a little bit of separation, makes some space there. I think he'll still be able to, score some the way that he has this season. And one thing that does give me a lot of confidence about Jalen heading into this postseason is he's been so much better, it feels like, this season about if he gets off to a slow start, he doesn't let it bog him down. Yeah. And this became really apparent in the stretch without Fred, kind of by necessity, right? Fred has been for a very long time. We talk about him being the safety net for this Rockets team, right? He's the, okay, big brother's out there. I don't have something. I tried, for the first 10, 15 seconds of the possession. Okay, I'm passing the grenade back to Fred, right? He'll make something out of nothing. And I feel like Jalen has gotten a lot better over the course of a game. If he starts off in a rough way, rough first quarter, missing a bunch of shots, whatever, he doesn't let it get him down. He doesn't let it affect the rest of his game where, yeah, he might go 1 for 5 in the first quarter or 0-4 from downtown, whatever, but he stays locked in and he keeps attacking. And more often than not, he finds himself over the course of a game. Sengun was kind of given that rope, that leeway. He established himself as the team's best player last season. And this year we saw a lot of games, especially earlier in the part of the season, where Sengun would start off really slow and then find himself kind of in the second half of a game, or even there were some of those games where he didn't show up until like the fourth quarter or overtime earlier this season. He kind of afforded himself that cachet, that runway where it's like, hey, he's struggling, but we know that he's got it there. We've seen it. He'll find his way, right? With Jalen, it was always a little bit of like, is it an off night or is he on? Yeah, and exactly. Now I feel like Jalen has earned some of that cachet where if he starts a game rough, it's okay. Keep going back to him, right? And that'll bode well in the playoffs where, yeah, he might have a rough first quarter. He might have a rough first half. But as long as he keeps the same mentality and stays aggressive instead of in the past, right? In previous years, previous seasons, sometimes you'd see Jalen almost have a willingness to fade into the background, especially if his teammates have it going, right? And he's just like, you know what? All right, I'll play off ball. I'll fade, whatever. And that can't happen. Even if other guys have it going, even if Dillon's knocking out shots, even if Jabari's got it going, Tari, Ime, whoever, Sengun, Fred, Jalen needs to be the guy, because at the end of a game, at the end of a close game, the ball needs to be in Jalen's hands. There needs to be a two-man game with him and LP, and that's how the Rockets are going to win close games in the playoffs. And for Jalen to be in that position, he can't fade into the background, and he hasn't done that recently, and that's what gives me a lot of confidence going to the postseason with him. Coming up, though, we want to talk about the other guy, the big guy in the middle, Alperen Sengun, expectations and adjustments for him ahead of the postseason, as well as we're going to get into thoughts about some of the role players on the roster. We're going to get there in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by Upwork. Look, scaling your business requires the right expertise at the right time. With Upwork, you can find specialized freelancers in marketing, development, design, and so much more. Experts ready to help you take your business to the next level. Upwork gives businesses flexibility by connecting them with top freelance talent across multiple industries, including IT, AI, web development, and marketing. Whether you need extra hands for a project or a long-term partner, Upwork makes hiring simple and affordable. You can find the right talent. They've got fast and easy hiring. Posting a job is free and simple, and within a day, multiple qualified candidates will be available to choose from. Cost-effective growth, it's all there with Upwork. Visit Upwork.com right now and post your job for free. That's Upwork.com, Upwork.com, Upwork.com to connect with top talent and grow your business today. Today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. Look, March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even whoever's cutting down the nets. Look, I'm Houston born and bred. I went to the University of Houston. I'm pulling for the Cougars all tournament long. I'm really excited to see them take on Gonzaga. It's going to be a great game. That's who I've got my eye on all tournament season. But you can follow your favorite team, follow your alma mater, check them out, stay in on the action. It's easy, it's fast. The FanDuel app is so simple to use. When you win, you get paid instantly. And with tournament games happening almost every day, there's always something exciting to bet on. So visit FanDuel.com to get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. And continuing on here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast, home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. All right, Madison. So for the big guy in the middle, for LP, the postseason, I feel like I think LP is going to be fine offensively in the postseason. If anything, when postseason basketball is going to cater to him a lot better than it will to Jalen, because that's when things slow down. You're going to be in the half court a lot more, and we know that's where LP loves to operate. Not that he can't, push the pace in transition or get a rebound and get an outlet pass and help ignite a break, that kind of thing. But LP is obviously a more kind of old school big man, loves to work in the half court, loves to get to his post ups, his isolation game, facing up, all that stuff. And so I fully expect him to kind of thrive, honestly, in the playoffs, at least offensively. The real question mark is going to be how does his defense hold up in the postseason? That's going to be the big question mark here.
Yeah, man, it's going to be a tall task for Alperen. I think that teams don't target in the regular season nearly as much as they do in the playoffs. And I think it'll be a testament or a test, not just for Sengun, but also Ime Udoka. You know, how does he deal with those? Because not there. I don't think it's acceptable over the course of a 7-game series to bench Alperen Sengun like he was in that certain stretch, right? You're going to need his offensive punch. And so you're going to have to scheme up ways to hide Alp, and Alp's just going to have to really lock in defensively one-on-one, and not just one-on-one, but on his closeouts. He's going to have to be able to close out with control, right? He's going to be able to have to close out in control, but still get to the shooter. And that's a really tough thing for Alp to do. And so that, I think, is going to be the biggest question mark, is how much of a liability defensively does Alp become? And are teams actively picking on him? Is he holding his own? And there's a lot of really good superstar players that we could be facing in the first round who would love to have Alp on an island in isolation. So I definitely think defensively that's going to be his biggest issue.
And I do really wonder, I have this sneaking suspicion that maybe one of the reasons that the Rockets have started throwing out that zone as much as we've seen recently is going to be a really good counter to protect Alp defensively in the playoffs, right? Because if you park Alp in the middle of a zone, or if you're running the jumbo lineup or whatever, you've got Adams out there as well, it's a lot easier for Alp to just guard one space of the floor. When the Rockets play zone and when it's the jumbo lineup where Adams is in the middle and Sengun's responsible for like one of the two corners, he does a pretty good job of holding his own in that area, of rotating out, of contesting shots, of sticking with perimeter guys. Now, to your point about kind of the reckless closeouts, those have been some of the spots where, you know, if Sengun has to be, you know, out near the top of the key for a second and then close out to the corner really quickly, you've seen some reckless closeouts that lead to a drive or a drive and kick or something like that.
That's the thing about a zone, though. Alp can be a bit reckless with a closeout, long as he doesn't foul the shooter, because there's nowhere to go. Where you're going to drive into the zone, you're going to drive into Steven Adams, right? And so that really helps him, and that's why I think he's been so good in the zone on those corners, because he's able to close out. Because Alp's quick enough to actually get out there. It's just if the guy pump fakes and breaks him down, he doesn't have the agility to redirect all that weight, right? But he can get out there and Alp reads the court well. You know what I mean? So I'll just add that. Like I think the zone protects those closeouts as well. And I think it'll be a weapon they use, especially against teams that are struggling to shoot.
Absolutely. And that's the one downside though to the zone, right? Is if you go up against a good shooting team, right? Like if you face the Timberwolves or something, and the T-Wolves have been a pretty, if I'm not mistaken, I'm like pretty sure they're one of the better 3-point shooting teams in the NBA. And obviously they got a ton of star power on their roster. They've got Ant, they've got Randall. Those are guys that are going to be really tough to try and contain in man-to-man coverage. And that's one thing you don't want, is you don't want like Anthony Edwards picking on Alperen Sengun in the pick and roll, or getting him on an island and isolating against him, you know, possession after possession after possession. And again, you don't see these kinds of things in the regular season, right? You'll see it for a possession or two. You'll see, you know, star take advantage of a big man on an island, you know, every so often. But the one thing that the Rockets did do a lot of earlier in the season, I feel like they kind of got away from it as the season went on, is they were pre-switching a lot of their actions. They were doing their best to keep Alperen Sengun out of a lot of the defensive actions. And it felt like they kind of got away from that as the season went on. And I don't know if that was just a lack of communication, or if it was just a ton of effort for the guys to be constantly communicating and trying to protect Alp like that. So maybe that's something that they can get back to, or try to maybe practice a little bit here in these final 12 games ahead of the postseason, so that they can have it to deploy again in conjunction with the zone situationally.
Yeah, no, definitely agree. And before we move on, I do want to highlight some other areas that LP, really needs to watch out for. And for me, offensively, he's not perfect, and it's the turnovers, especially when he's on his backside. He's in the middle of the court and he gets the ball, and his back is turned when he's trying to do a dribble handoff or make plays out of that. Guys have a tendency to dig hard, and his back is
you got a little Quentin Grimes PTSD, huh? He did that twice.
Oh, yeah. Look, thank God he seen him that last time and got the foul. But but that actually happens very often to LP, where he's and the postseason is where that stuff's going to be on film. And they're going to be attacking that every time. Right? That's going to be a point of emphasis for teams of where they can get easy turnovers. And Alp's awareness in those situations are just going to have to be better. And lastly, free throws. I think he's going to be we find LP shooting free throws in tough situations over and over and over again as the leader of this team, as the guy who can go get his own shot, the best isolation player on this team. And he's often getting to the free throw line down the stretch of games. And we often live and die by if LP can hit those shots. And with the pressure dialed up, I like to see LP, really step up to the challenge.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, over the last handful of games, though, he's actually been really phenomenal from the charity stripe. I have the numbers in front of me, and for some reason it's not. Stupid Basketball Reference is not wanting to actually run the table for me, which would be super sick if it could actually pull it up. There we go. Over his last, 7 games, he's shooting 78% from the charity stripe. That's really good. He's had multiple games where he's just been really, really solid from the free throw line. So whether it was just not being mentally locked in, whatever. Maybe Ime stuck him in a gym somewhere and said, go get up 1,000 free throws. I don't know. But it's been a lot better to see him be much more consistent at the free throw line, because you're absolutely right. He's a guy who can pretty much draw fouls at will, and he's going to have the ball in his hands a lot at the end of games, right? The guy, whoever starts the offense, whether it's Jalen, whether it's Fred, it's going to be a guard kind of initiating the offense, but there's going to be plenty of chances for LP to be the closer, especially in the playoffs, especially in these half court sets where he gets his chance to, attack and to take over a game at the end of regulation, or maybe even in some overtime situations. My thing for him, and this feeds into the turnover discussion as well, and this part of this is about spacing, right? Sometimes the Rockets spacing just isn't great, but I just feel like he's gotten a lot more predictable with his face up, attack, and spin move. And I feel like he used to do have a little bit more wiggle to his game and maybe be a little bit quicker, and it was maybe a little bit less side to side and more straight down the paint when he would do that drive and attack and spin. And now it's he'll do the hezzy, and he brings the ball way out here to his hip, and he's basically offering it up to whatever defenders are cheating in from the wing, right? If they're boxes and elbows and they're right there waiting for him, he's almost handing it to them on a silver platter, to where when he spins, he's in another defender's lap, and it's an easy double team or triple team where they just collapse in on him. So I just want him to be a little bit less predictable with that, right? He's so creative and so crafty, at times. But there are also just other times where it feels like he telegraphs the move that he's going to make, and it happens against elite defenders, and sometimes it happens even against lesser defenders who are just kind of holding their ground, and he, spins into that extra help, down there on the low block or whatever. So the turnovers are absolutely going to be something that he has to work on. I do feel like over the last probably 5 or 10 games or so, the decision making has been a little bit better. He's processing some of his reads quicker, and that's been the thing. Is it's kind of felt like he's been stuck in this: am I scoring? Am I passing? Am I looking for the kick out? What am I doing with the ball? And we talked about this at, before the season even started. I think in one of our season prediction kind of pods or whatever, is the biggest jump this year for LP was going to be, okay, last year you were the guy, you were the best player on the team all season long, and teams game plan for you all season long. Coming into this year, they know, number one on the scouting report, how do you stop LP? How do you take him away? How do you force the ball out of his hands? How do you make anybody else on the Rockets beat you? And that's led to him having to adjust and understand, okay, when teams are double teaming me, triple teaming me, how do I make those reads, right? How do I make those kick out passes? Where are my shooters, right? Where are my cutters at? And I feel like he's been reading those a lot better as of late. Some of those passes to Tari, like on those little, backdoor cuts and, those little passes in traffic in the paint have been phenomenal. It feels like he's getting back to some of the passing that we know that Alp's capable of.
Yeah, man, I totally agree. I mean, and Alp has the ability to move defenders with his eyes. It's one of the things that, while I'm not worried about his decision making in the playoffs, I think it'll be pretty good as long as he doesn't turn the ball over. He's from his handle or a guy digging on him. I think he's going to be fine because he's going to be able to create windows with his eyes, and those are the things that you can't game plan against, right? You know what I mean? When a guy does that, and it's something that Jalen will have to add to his game as well.
Coming up, we got to talk about the role players for this Houston Rockets team and who do we think is going to shine the most in the postseason. We're going to get there in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Look, daylight savings, it snuck up on me again. I don't know about you, but if you're feeling like you lost that hour of sleep, because I certainly do, 5 Hour Energy has your back. The extra sunshine means more time for fun, but sometimes you need a little boost to power through the day. Whether you're staying up late watching the NCAA tournament, squeezing in a round of golf after work, or just trying to keep up with your busy day, 5 Hour Energy gives you that quick, refreshing pick-me-up whenever you need it. It's complete on-the-go convenience. Whether I'm at a game, covering the Rockets, traveling, 5 Hour Energy is so easy to grab and keeps me feeling refreshed. So head on over to 5hourenergy.com to find over 15 flavors to choose from, including watermelon, blue raspberry, and peach mango. You can even build your own 12-pack or 24-pack delivered right to your doorstep. Need one now? Grab a 5 Hour Energy shot at your local grocery or convenience store. They're everywhere. Stock up today and stay energized.
The NCAA tournament is here, and so is the bracket breakdown.
Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup.
Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free.
It's your team every day.
And final segment here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. I got to apologize because I teed up this segment. I said role players, but we're kind of focusing on the young core because the end of the day is, Dillon has postseason experience, Fred has postseason experience, Adams has postseason experience. We're focusing on the young guys here. And the kind of the rest of the roster is made up of the role players, right? Jalen and Sengun are your stars. Amin Thompson is kind of a pseudo role player at this point because we know that he's blossoming into a star and he's had games where he absolutely feels and looks like a star player this season. But for all intents and purposes, the way that this Rockets team utilizes him on a night-to-night basis when he's available and healthy, which, knock on wood, hopefully he's back in time to ragdoll Tyler Herro across the floor in Miami. Fingers crossed for that one. But Madison, when you look at the rest of the guys on the roster, who do you want to talk about first? Who are you looking at first as far as postseason expectations?
Well, the guys I'm looking at first is really Tari and Ime. You already mentioned Ime and Tari. And when I think about postseason play, like what are the things that role players do that really swing series, right? And there's a specific archetype of player that can swing a series, and that is the defensive playmaker. Every championship team has unearthed a defensive playmaker that has really swung a championship because most of the time your stars are going to be your stars every night. You need the others on your team to have outlier performances. And luckily for the Rockets, they have a couple guys on the team, couple young guys who have the potential to be, superstars in that sense as playmakers on defense. And I'll just give you a couple examples. Trevor Ariza for the Lakers championship was an ultra playmaker that really swung that series. James Posey for a Boston Celtics championship back in the day with Kevin Garnett, right? These guys really swing series. And with Tari Eason's defensive instincts, right? Those type of things, his relentless motor. Once he's able to slide back into his role off the bench, I think he'll have even more energy to really get out there. His stocks are steadily starting to climb. And I think he'll provide an avenue for the Rockets to get out running with his defense, right, and get easy buckets, which is incredibly hard to come by in the playoffs. And that could be the difference in a series. And all you need is, Tari or Ime to have their imprints on a game so drastically, that'll swing a series where they just win one game on them by themselves by just having an outlier production game. And that, I think, is the value in this Rockets young core, is that we have guys who, if they have just one outlier game, they could really swing a series. And I think with the defensive playmaking of Tari Eason and the consistent all-around defense of Ime Thompson, I think they definitely have the ability to steal a game or two in a series by themselves.
What's really funny is I know we're talking about the young guys here in particular, but it feels like up and down this Rockets roster, outside of the star guys, right? The one really cool thing about this roster is it feels like on any given night, you can get one of those outlier performances from Fred, from Dillon, from Tari, Jabari, from Ime, whoever. And that's what made this Rockets team so competitive this season, is the whole, sometimes you, sometimes me, always us. Sometimes it feels like that bites this team in the ass, but I feel like in the postseason, that's actually going to maybe be a weapon advantage for this team, because you don't just have to sit here and say, okay, we need Jalen and Sengun to produce at the highest level because otherwise we're screwed. It's not just Jalen and Sengun and role players. It is, but it's not. Like, those guys can all step up and have big nights of their own, and we've seen that all throughout the regular season. To me, I'm really I really think Jabari is going to be a big X factor for this team in the postseason. I know we just talked about it last segment about how, Ime's adjustment can't simply be to just go small if Alp is being targeted defensively, right? There needs to be creative ways to keep your best player on the floor. You can't just allow a team to scheme him off or target him to where you just fold the cards and say, all right, I guess we're just going to have to live without you. That's unacceptable. And, that's going to be a big test for Ime, but we're still going to see plenty of Jabari at the 5. And I very much feel like that's going to be the Rockets kind of pseudo, it's funny. The Rockets have kind of two versions of their death ball lineup, right? The Warriors had that death ball lineup that they would roll out with Draymond at the 5 and Iggy and KD and Steph and Clay, and that lineup caused mayhem, right? Teams had no answer for that lineup. It feels like the Rockets kind of have two versions of that lineup. They've got the jumbo lineup that it feels like teams really don't have an answer for yet. And it's going to be really hard for a lot of teams to have the size and the physicality to match up when you have Tari and Bari and Sengun and Adams all out there at the same time. But the flip side of that is the small ball lineup, right? Where you can run Jabari at the 5 and then have Tari and Dillon and Ime and Jalen or Fred or whoever else, and you can have that 5 out, switch everything lineup. And the thing that excites me the most about that, and we saw this the other night against the 76ers, Jabari is so much more capable he's capable of so much more than what we've seen so far from him in his career. He's been pretty one-dimensional at times. But seeing the way that he was attacking on the roll the other night against the 76ers, where he was getting passes going downhill and using his size against smaller defenders, there's really something there about, I don't know if it's the jumbo lineups just really unlocked his confidence, where he's like, nah, man, I'm a 7-foot hooper. I can go and get mine over a smaller defender. It's nice. It's good to see. And I really feel like that small ball lineup with Jabari at the 5 is going to be the haymaker that can either kind of, turn the tide of a game for the Rockets or help them get ahead or kind of counter something else that a team is doing. That's going to be the lineup that I feel like is a major X factor for the Rockets in any playoff series that they go up against.
Yeah, Jabari is the ultimate lineup versatility chess piece. And that you just spoke about two major different ways that you can use him at the 5 and at the 3 in the jumbo lineup, which give these unconventional lineups that can be tailor-made for different matchups. And we know matchups are so important in the playoffs. And this guy becomes this ultimate chess piece. And if we get the Jabari that's shooting 40% from 3 in the playoffs, he will swing a series, right? And so those are the types of things as role players you guys. And I love that Ime's empowered him off the bench to be more of an offensive player, really explore his offensive game. His turnaround has actually been very excellent this year, especially since he got back.
It's funny. I'm so sorry. I want to jump in really quick because you and I talked about this so much earlier this season, right? Talking about, man, we'd like to see Ime like maybe, sub out Jabari early, bring him back with the second unit, let him have a little bit more rope, a little bit more runway with that second unit. And it's happening now. It's happening in a different way because he's not in the starting lineup anymore. But this is effectively accomplishing what we talked about earlier this season of giving Jabari a bigger role offensively at times because he's not playing, fourth or fifth banana in the starting lineup anymore.
Yeah, exactly. And I think his defense has actually improved now that he's coming off the bench. He's going to get second lineups, and also he has more energy to expend on defense now. You know what I mean? I think his rotations, they've been even crisper. And you can say crispier, it's okay. Yeah, and so I think that's a perfect point that Jabari really, is a dynamic piece that Ime Udoka can employ. And speaking of that, we speak of these guys and how they can sweep series, and I think it brings up a bigger point. Ime Udoka, how does he perform? How does he deploy these guys? How does he prepare them for these matchups? All right. I mean, our young Rockets, there are a lot of ways they can come out and respond to the playoffs, right? They can come and get hit in the mouth and fold, or they can, get up and learn to match that physicality. They've been coached on physicality all year. They know how to play that way. They can dig deep and meet the challenge, become the hunters, become the underdog that's hungry and ready to take somebody's mantle. That's the type of mentality I want to see from these young Rockets. Not necessarily saying we don't know who they're going to play. Not necessarily saying they're going to win a series or not. I want them to compete hard and really make a team sweat when they play them. But a lot of teams they've been talking in the national media and on podcasts about teams wanting to play the Rockets in the first round. I and the Rockets as this young team who we want, who doesn't have experience. I want the Rockets to make them regret that. You know what I mean? Really give them a tough series. And I think if they do that, I'd be really happy with their play. And it's all about Ime Udoka being ready and getting these guys prepared for that physicality. Also encouraging them when they make mistakes. Because Ime Udoka's had a very short leash on guys, right? But when we get into the playoffs, man, you need guys who can make plays. Jalen takes a tough shot and misses it, right? You might have to roll that back now. I think you've ironed out the mistakes of these guys. These guys listen to you, right? So now you need to give them the confidence, like we talked about Jalen's confidence, to kind of shoot through the struggles and still bring out better games, right? Ime Udoka talked about it in the press conference, right? And now he needs to continue to cultivate that in Jalen. Hey, you missed a couple shots. We need you to make plays. We need you to be aggressive. We need you to play confident, right? And I think that was one of the things that happened in the play-in tournament series, is that Jalen went and took a bad shot trying to get 3 points back, and Ime yanked him, right? And then he had a really, really tough game because now he's scared to shoot. We can't have those. we can't have that in the playoffs, right? We need our guys knowing where our hierarchy is and that we trust them and that they're going to make mistakes, but play through them, because if you play through them, you can still win these games.
Well, who else was an underdog that everybody doubted?
I hated Jesus. Everybody's got something to say, bro. Like, everybody's going to say anything.
Oh God, I love that quote. I'm gonna get that's my new favorite quote on the soundboard. I swear to God. I swear to him. On that note, Madison, let everybody know where to track you down at.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at MadmanLeaks. Come talk Rockets basketball and NBA draft.
That's going to do it for another edition of Locked On Rockets. As always, thanks so much for checking out the show. Remember, the best way to help us grow our show is to listen every single day on a podcast platform of your choosing. Like, comment, subscribe on YouTube. Also, check out the Locked On Rockets newsletter. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. And we look forward to having you back right here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.